Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. We're here tonight with Ajahn Kovilo and Ayasoma. And my name is Bhante Sudaso, and we're here to talk about renunciation, which is a very important topic in Buddhism. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then we'll each say a few words on the topic, and you're welcome to type in questions at any time, and we'll respond to questions at the end. So starting with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So maybe we can start by inviting Ayasoma to say a few words on the topic of renunciation. And then we'll pass it to Ajahn Kovilo, and I'll put in some remarks at some point as well.
All right, well, thank you, Bhante, for the invitation. So I will renounce to start first and pass it on to Ajahn Kovilo.
Okay. Although you two really are doing the biggest act of renunciation today, I don't know if it's going to be a spoiler. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, well, the spoiler is that Bhante Sudaso and Ayasoma are actually leaving the monastery that they have so generously and kindly and compassionately been founding for the last 5 or 6 years, to go to a whole other continent, go to Italy to continue work creating the Italian Empty Cloud Monastery. And yeah, they're leaving later tonight, leaving the monastery at 10 p.m. and I've been with them all day, and it's been really impressive, actually, the degree to which you two are seemingly so untouched by what I think for most people would be a rather huge endeavor. I know my mom, starts planning for a weekend trip, a week in advance. So just putting all her things in her bag and prepping, whereas you both have been very spacious throughout the course of the day. And there's tons of passwords and things to pass on and all the things which one accumulates to some extent with the monastery, but you two aren't actually bringing that much. So we live lives as monastics. We're almost symbols. We're almost a flag for renunciation. That's what the color is. And hopefully we're living that, and it is some degree of giving up of what most people consider as pleasure. In the Aranavibhanga Sutta, Majjhima 139, it says you should know how to define pleasure. And knowing how to define pleasure, you should seek pleasure, you should pursue pleasure internally. And then it goes to define the 5 chords of sensuality: sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, which are wished for, desired, agreeable, delightful, provocative of lust. And these are not to be cultivated, not to be pursued. They are actually bayatabang, to be feared to some extent. These are the things which most humans, most beings are just completely obsessed with, and they're things which, why the Buddha might suggest that we should actually be wary of these is because we become addicted to them, and becoming addicted to them, we don't, most people have never even conceived that there's anything better than the beautiful things of the world and the melodious sounds of the world, whereas the Buddha teaches nekama sukha. So the sukha, the pleasure of renunciation, the pleasure of peace, upasama sukha, paviveka sukha, the sukha of seclusion, the sambodhi sukha, the sukha of awakening. And the Buddha says you should pursue these, you should develop these, and that's the flavor of happiness that we're developing. And it can take some time. It can take some time. I mean, I think anybody who's drawn to a monastic life to some degree, at least ideally on the level of ideals, is somehow our perceptions have shifted towards seeing the beauty in renunciation, the beauty of giving up, and the detriment, the liability, the adinava, the danger of sensuality, whether it's based on addiction or whether it's based on just seeing that even really good, you can live a really good lay life, a really good life of sensuality, and it's unsatisfactory. It will end, and things fall apart. Things fall apart. And so getting a flavor for renunciation at first when we come to monasteries where it is on the level of the mind. We like the idea of renunciation, but we're not necessarily getting the very visceral and deep pleasure and joy, the welling up of sukha, piti and sukha, joy, pamoja, even rapture that the Buddha points to, that greater levels of letting go, specifically the letting go, the nekama level of mind, letting go of mental obstructions, letting go of sensuality, not just pushing it away. Like we move to the monastery and we have put aside a certain number of sensual things, but we're not yet inwardly capable oftentimes to experience the deeper pleasure of the nekama of jhana, the nekama of concentration, and it takes a while to experience that pleasure or the flavor of renunciation, that is the actual noble attainments. But we're heading in that direction and giving up, renouncing unhealthy friendships, renouncing unhealthy professions, and aiming in the direction of simplicity. I think for most people, framing nekama, or what we're framing as renunciation, as simplicity is a lot more palatable for people who still are attached on different levels. I mean, you've got magazines, you've got a few magazines with simple in the simple living, probably some other ones too, but at least that one. But that seems doable. People can see, like Marie Kondo, she's a Japanese kind of minimalist influencer who suggests ways that people can simplify and minimize all their possessions, because it doesn't take too long of accumulating stuff that you realize what we chant when we go forth is that the homeless life is free as air, household life is cramped and dusty, and the more stuff you have, the more surfaces there are to accumulate dust. And the same is kind of true for a monastery on certain levels. And I really delight that you two will be moving in the direction of that which is virajam, what we chant in the Metta Sutta, which is dustless, the spotless, dustless, free happiness of, you'll be living in a forest, and dust is just dirt. Like when dust falls in a house, it's like, it's dust. And we have to spend time cleaning it. Whereas when dust falls in a forest, it's just dirt and you live with it. And it's part of the scenery, and it's a lovely aspect of life. And you two will be very quickly, just, I don't know if tomorrow or the next day, you'll be arriving to hopefully a more dust-free existence. So just delighting Anumodana in the kind of forced, and it's not an accident. It's not an accident. You've given up the things of the world to create a monastery which is relatively dust-free, but now taking another step to move to a place which is, there's no dusting you need to do in a forest other than your shrine, so the more and more simplicity. So maybe we'll talk more about the Lena vision, the Lena Pada or whatever it is, but we'd love to hear more about Nekama and leave it at that for now. And yeah.
Sadhu. Soma?
Well, I have to say, Venerable Kavilo is always so kind and just absolutely sweet. In fact, it's his sweet 16, actually, Vasa. So he has complete his 16th Vasa as a bhikkhu. And sweet 16, I have to say, is very appropriate. So I feel that there was a lot of praise that wasn't deserved. But I feel like it's actually relatively simple to let go of stuff, but it's a lot harder to actually let go of other and, heavy things, a lot of things that, we accumulate. And actually Venerable Kavilo is particularly impressive in the way that he has really truly let go of arrogance. And that is something I feel that was very, I think, obvious and in the beginning of the talk that you have shared with us this evening. And so that is really truly, I have to say, something inspiring to me, and really why actually we do these practices. Also why, I feel like, yes, for myself, like now, after spending a lot of time here in the United States and going to Italy, there is not really actually any type of renunciation. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of there's so much goodness. Actually, it's so nice to be at Empty Cloud Monastery and seeing a lot of people that have no idea who I am, and and have no connection to myself, and also I have no kind of connection to, no sense of possession towards this place or towards the history of this place. And I remember actually as a layperson that was not the case. So when I had, for example, done projects or created things, there was definitely a lot of clinging and identification, and therefore it was very difficult to inevitably get separated from whatever we liked. And a lot of the times actually it wasn't even the stuff itself or the project itself, but really it was getting rid of or getting separated for perhaps the praise. Well, the blame was kind of nice to be separated from, but but the praise that comes inevitably whenever someone is creating something, that can be actually quite pleasant. And so that's, I feel, why we tend to cling to things that in some way we have put together or contributed. But really for me, and personally, Buddhism, like the practice of actually that was taught by the Buddha, has really taught me to shift from, doing things that I liked or seeking things that I liked to actually doing things that were necessary and needed. And this monastery, actually, I had zero. When we first started, I really didn't want to do it because it required a lot of work. So I'll be very transparent. I was like, oh, I hope, we won't get, when there was the fundraiser, I was like, I hope we don't get this monastery. But then I was also like, if we'll get it, it's fine. I will, like, it will be for the benefit of many sentient beings, so I will be happy. But if we don't get it, it's actually, I might be a little happier. So it'll be less work to do. But then the organization acquired it, and so there was a lot of work that was needed put into it, a lot of love for the Dhamma, actually, for the fact that it was creating a place that was beneficial for my personal practice, but also the practice for many other sentient beings. And so it's really, like a different perspective. It's not anymore I want this, or it's related to me, but it's really related to looking at how powerful these teachings are, how powerful, really nothing has been, we didn't invent anything, we didn't create anything. What this is just the inheritance of the Buddha. So I feel like we should be, for me, it's very much about reminding ourselves that we're the heirs of the Buddha's Dhamma, not of his material wealth. And so all of these things actually do not belong to anyone. They belong actually to the Buddha, like all the donations, all the gifts. That's all, like, we really didn't do anything to deserve this. It's the legacy of the teachings of the Buddha and, the incredible Dhamma that he has taught, and all the incredible sentient beings who practiced, right? That became the Noble Sangha, and have inspired so many people for the past 2,500 years that have made Empty Cloud possible. So now it's just so beautiful to actually share this gift with even more people. And there is, it's so beautiful that actually it can exist, can keep on existing and having a new form without me having to be personally involved, without it being about Ayasoma or Bhante Sudaso or Ajahn Kavilo or anyone. Like, it's really, or Ayaso Bana, who's taking the lead of this monastery. But really, we're all just servants of the Dhamma. So then Empty Cloud, then it's empty of what it needs to be empty, and it's full of what is actually really the fullness that we want, which is the practice of the Dhamma. So I'm not sure. I mean, my English is just getting very worse and worse.
No, it's totally fluent, 100%.
So I don't know if it made any sense, but we'll see.
It's true.
I do have arrogance, by the way. Just clarifying.
I don't think
do.
so.
Yeah.
No. Venerable, you have a precept of not lying.
Exactly.
Well, there's asmimana, the most subtle and refined form of arrogance. So on the topic of renunciation, so one thing which I found really useful in my own practice for kind of getting a handle on renunciation is emphasizing the aspect of contentment. An example of this is just a simple example is you might be experiencing craving for something, like maybe you're thinking of a really nice chocolate or some sweets or some dessert or something in your mind, and you're thinking like, oh, if I just got that sweet thing, then that would be so delightful, that would be so wonderful. So then you think like, oh, when I'm supposed to practice renunciation, which means giving up the things that I like, it means I don't get to have that pleasant experience, which I'm imagining having in the future. Well, instead, what if we relate to it as contentment? It's like right in this moment, being content with things as they are. So like right now, what's going on right now? So I'm sitting in a quiet, peaceful room with nice people. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. Everything's okay. I can be content with this moment. Of course, if I start imagining all the pleasant experiences I could be having, well, there's an endless list. And you start getting your imagination going, you can start imagining all kinds of pleasant experiences that you're not having. But that doesn't do any good. That just makes the mind uncomfortable, because then the mind is full of desire, it's full of longing. But instead, if we just come to an attitude of contentment in the present moment, appreciation of this present moment, then the mind naturally inclines towards renunciation. The renunciation of conceptualizing about the future, or the renunciation of craving for some experience in the future. So to me, this is the first major entry point to renunciation. It's cultivating contentment in the present moment, appreciation of just this moment, whatever it is. And then also looking at the present moment. It's also recognizing that whatever is going on in the present moment is also temporary. So it can't be relied upon, it can't be depended upon. So being content with the way things are also means being content with the fact that things are subject to change. So right now it's not too hot or not too cold, but it might actually get colder. It usually does as it gets late in the evening. Or it might get hotter. Somebody might sneak upstairs and crank the heat way up, and then it's blistering hot in the middle of the night. That could also happen. So things are subject to change. So also being content with that reality of change. Recognizing that the nature of things is to flow ever onwards, this constant flow of change. The nature of experience is to constantly shift and change moment by moment. So also being content with that reality of change and facing each new moment as an opportunity to cultivate equanimity, an opportunity to cultivate joyfulness and an unconditional joy with whatever is arising. So this principle of contentment then naturally leads to renunciation, because we recognize that what we're renouncing, what we're relinquishing, is actually our discomfort. The discomfort that's caused by desire, the discomfort that's caused by aversion. the discomfort that's caused by imagining a better future, rather than appreciating the opportunity that we have right now to be happy with things just the way they are. Again, one of the issues I've noticed a lot of people encountering with Buddhist practice is that when they hear words like renunciation and relinquishment and non-attachment, then it all sounds like there's something good that they have to give up. Like there's something pleasant and great that they're going to lose. But actually, if we relate to it in a different way, it's about cultivating contentment and appreciation and joyfulness in the present moment. You're actually gaining something. You're gaining this serene joy right now, which is actually much better than what we're giving up. What are we actually giving up? We're giving up the discomfort of desire and attachment and aversion. So we're relinquishing pain, but what we're gaining is joy. What we're relinquishing is the agitation of an unsettled, defiled mind, the agitation of a craving and aversive mind, and we're gaining the serenity of contentment, the serenity of appreciative joy, appreciating this moment just as it is. We're gaining the peacefulness of acceptance of change, acceptance that everything is subject to change, and that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with change. It's just the nature of reality. So this is a reframing of renunciation that I find really helpful. And as we cultivate that, then renunciation in a physical sense becomes much easier. It's like, well, it doesn't really matter if we lose physical things, because that's not what our happiness is based on. Contentment is something which is independent of our possessions. It doesn't really matter if the current experience comes to an end, because that's the nature of all things. And the new moment is just another opportunity to practice contentment and appreciation and joy. So then our relationship with renunciation can be reframed into something joyful. This joyful, serene contentment and appreciation that we bring into every moment. So those are a few thoughts I'd like to add to the conversation.
Sadhu.
So maybe if one of the other venerables wants to pick up the thread and say a few more words on the topic.
And also, if our friends online have any questions, maybe that will make it a little bit more, or comments.
Maybe just one little thing. This probably I don't know about my favorite Dhammapada verse, but Dhammapada number 290 is that when one, by giving up a lesser happiness, gains a greater happiness, the wise person will let go of the lesser happiness with their eyes on that greater happiness. And some people hear about Buddhism and hear it's all about dukkha, the suffering. And that's true, but you can also, as you were pointing to, Bhante, the whole path can be framed as one of just getting better and better at sukha, getting better and better at pleasure, finding pleasure is happiness, and sukha in Pali means both pleasure and happiness, which are less and less harmful, more and more refined, more and more subtle. And yeah, that's in Buddhist cosmology, you do see the angels are those who experience the most subtle and refined happiness, and it's the pleasure of jhana. And if by letting go of a lesser one you gain a greater one, the wise person will let go of the lesser one. I think Ajahn Lee Dhammadharo, great Thai Dhamma teacher, gives a simile of like a ladder. It's like you're climbing up this ladder of practice, and you have to let go of the lower ladder before you grab up to the next rung. And there's this space in between, when you're in between rungs, where one hand is kind of just floating free, and if you're high enough up or wherever you are, it might be this sense of imbalance. And that's kind of how it feels for the first however long. It might be months, it might be years at a monastery, when you're getting used to we don't eat at afternoon, there are lots of things, we got so many don'ts, we got don'ts on top of don'ts, and we got sub don'ts.
Instead of donuts, we get don'ts.
Oh, it's true. We get donuts too, though. Sometimes you don't have to eat them.
We get a lot more don'ts than we get donuts.
That's true. It's true.
Yeah, it is interesting though, the dukkha, sukha. So what comes to mind is also the distortion, the vipallasa, the distortion view that we have, that we perceive what is dukkha as sukha, and we perceive what is sukha as being dukkha. And especially actually at the very beginning, this can be the practice of renunciation when we start doing it in the areas that we're perhaps not terribly skilled at. It, you know, it can, we might perceive it as dukkha, and it can also like really feel as dukkha, and we might go like, well, I don't know about this sukha pronunciation. I feel like, ice cream was great, and renouncing ice cream is really not great. Or whatever it is, right? It can feel very, very painful. And that was, for example, my experience actually with when I started the path with the precepts. So I remember I had a strong habit of, I was pretty good with humans, but I was really terrible with tiny little insects. So actually putting down, the the weapon and really training in renouncing to kill was actually very, very difficult, especially when we had this like famous ant infestation at the previous center, and like, my previous self would have like wanted to exterminate them all, and like, got it in like very easy and quick. And actually not killing was a source of, renouncing to kill was actually very stressful, a lot of dukkha. But then just by training, so the kind of this like putting a lot of stress to really follow the teachings first. But then I remember then when there was that breakthrough of like really mastering this new habit of not killing, renouncing to kill, and having that peace and ease and that sukha, like having internalized basically the renunciation, and having seen how much irritation I had picked up, like by picking up, the weapon and like trying to kill all of these sentient beings, right? And so same with like white lies, in the very beginning, it was very difficult to speak in a way that was true all the time. And sometimes like there was just a strong habit to say some white lies that, I felt like it was kind of also practical. And then, like renouncing that, very, very, it was kind of unpleasant, but then you're like, oh, this is just so comfortable, like not to have to think anymore about what did I say to that person, or my mom, like, this or that, like, oh, it's always crystal clear. So that, I feel, can give us a bit of an insight also when we're talking about sukha, if we're not really perceiving it at the very beginning, and actually leaning into this renunciation, leaning into this letting go. And also as we are experiencing naturally clinging to all of whatever we're attached to, then seeing how painful it is. This has been also very helpful for me, like really looking at the amount of drama. The other night we were talking with the lay residents here, right? Like I feel like in order to really practice the Dhamma, we need to get tired of the drama, right? So there's all this drama that we're constantly creating in our minds and our hearts by clinging to this, and like, oh, like I want this and I have to have this, and this has to stop, and it's so much unnecessary drama. But unfortunately we have to a certain degree, like before we let it go, we have to be still doing it, but with an awareness of what we're doing. It's really seeing this suffering. And then if we are there present, going like, oh, I'm doing this again, this is painful, at a certain point we can just get tired of it. And I feel like that's the opening for the Dhamma, to actually really, there's like less Dhamma, more drama, less drama, more Dhamma. And then at a certain point, no drama and just Dhamma. And then with that, we have more faith, because we can really see the trueness of this, right? That's why actually, for example, poverty, like we take vows of poverty, but there's a huge difference in taking intentionally vows of poverty and just, becoming impoverished without your will, right? That's sometimes it sounds like maybe as monastics, we're kind of romanticizing poverty. But really, it's not actually romanticizing people who are having a dire situation, but rather it's actually intentionally, right, giving up things. It's not romanticizing, it's an actual practice. So one really does that and sees the wisdom, the reality of it. But it is through intention, through choice. It's not the state itself. The state itself, if one doesn't choose it, that can be actually an infernal realm. It's kind of like a prison. Like if you are in, they call the room where you're isolated,
Solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement. That's one of the biggest hell realms for most prisoners to get into that room. But for Buddhist monastic, it's kind of like, what?
So can I sign up for that?
Yeah. I remember going with my mom actually to visit some of the Catholic monasteries, and they had this practice in the Middle Ages to wall themselves in, and they had a little like hole where like people would pass them food, and my mom and my dad were with me, and they were horrified. They were like, "Oh, it's just awful." And I remember going, "Oh, that sounds like so great. Can I do it? Where can I go?" Right? So it's really, you have to also kind of want to, and then it creates this room.
There was an American monk at City of 10,000 Buddhas who did that, was given permission by Master Wa to wall up the door and basically just be given food, live there. I think it was like 2 years that he lived like that. So.
Wow. And how did he walk? Like within?
Yeah, I mean, they're really small rooms. It must have been a small rectangle.
Sadhu. Oh, there's a few questions. Oh, Venerable Nisamo is online. Good to see you, Venerable. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And Kumu here says, have you heard of a method in Sweden called death cleaning that a person can do while alive as a layperson to get rid of non-essential items in a home? I haven't heard of this. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of it. And I think one variation that I've heard of is like, I don't know all the details of death cleaning, but one really useful variant is you literally pack everything in your house into boxes, and then you put the boxes all in one corner of your house, and then you only take out what you need. You basically live out of these boxes, and then after 6 months or so, you give everything that you didn't use in those 6 months away. So yeah, definitely not. I had heard of death cleaning, but it's a different.
It's very funny because actually what came to mind for me was basically we all did this practice essentially before ordination. You literally have to kill yourself in a way. So therefore also get rid of your stuff. And I remember actually it was very interesting because there were a few things that I was really attached to and that I really loved. And I remember going to some of my Buddhist friends in New York and trying to give them basically either my favorite shoes or like my favorite book. With the shoes I was kind of like more successful, but with the with the books, I remember this lady looking at me like, no thank you. And I was so shocked because that book was meant it was such a big deal in my mind, and
What
I couldn't.
book?
It was Maurizio Cattelan, this famous artist in Italy, and anyway, it was this very specific series of modern art, but I thought everybody should like. everybody liked, even if you didn't know about him, you must have liked him. So it was very interesting because I realized how meaningless actually are for the most, for the majority of the people in the world. The things that we really treasure are actually just meaningless, pointless. Just like when we relate to, I don't know, maybe people have like a collection of action figures I've seen and they're like really into it, and I'm like, who cares, right? So then that was very useful for me to have, I think, this perspective that you're talking about, like it's just, you're dead. And what, like, no one, like, why are we spending all this time accumulating stuff that literally as soon as we will die, like, it will be, nobody will care. Actually, my parents, my dad died and my mom got dementia, so in a certain way she also died. And there's all this stuff in their house that they spent all their life actually preserving for us, for their children. And my brothers are completely uninterested, and I became a monastic, so it's just now really not really valuable in and of itself, like in the way that they wanted it to do. So I feel like I kind of like the death cleaning. I feel like actually all the lay people should be really into it, start cleaning up everything and giving it away to others, and seeing, what is really actually important. What is the inheritance that we're also giving to our children, right? As lay people, you should be asking yourself this. And it's really not a bunch of stuff, but it's really what actually is left over, what is really important, what really goes through generations, is actually values, is actually, like, for example, the teachings of the Dharma, like teaching how to really deal with old age, sickness, and death, how to deal with kindness, how to deal with, like, letting go, right? Like, how to, the Dharma is really what we should be passing on, what we should be collecting and not renouncing to.
Before we go to the next question, I'm curious, Bhante Sudaso, if you have any monastic confessions about your pre-monastic death cleaning, any, pre-Sudaso things that you had to give away that you were cherishing, like the art book of Soma?
Well, not really, because, I mean, to be honest, as a layperson, I already lived a very simple and uncluttered life. So I had very minimal clothing, very minimal possessions. Like, I just wasn't, even as a layperson, I was never really interested in accumulating stuff. So actually, when I decided to move to a monastery, it was very simple for me. Like, I had very few things. So I just really pared it down to, like, what did I absolutely need, like, to go to the monastery. So, like, a basic minimum of simple clothing and, like, basic toiletries and so on. And I just didn't really have much else. And I just gave away or threw away the other stuff. It wasn't, so for me, it wasn't that difficult.
So you had some level of, I remember you saying that before you ordained, you sewed your own Zen kind of rakusu? Rakusu. Did you keep that? Or do you still have it?
I actually don't have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's a whole story around that, because I had lived at a Zen center for 2 years, and while I was there, I sewed a rakusu and took the Zen precepts. And then when I went to become a Theravada monk, I actually kept that until right before my full ordination. But that's a whole other story.
Okay. But it's fascinating.
He was already dead before ordaining.
Yeah.
And what about you, Venerable, actually? Do you have any death
Did
cleaning?
you have some, like, massive stockpile of cherished possessions that...
Not massive, but I did have a big yard sale. Give it all away. And then I remember at the monastery, we still have to look after ourselves. Like, for when we're in white, we're still having to buy toiletries at Abhayagiri for ourselves. And so I kept some money, and then right before I took Samanera novice ordination, I had $600 2 weeks before ordination, and I bought a copy of the Tipitaka in Pali for the monastery.
Awesome.
And then I had $10 left the day before ordination, and I wish the story ended very inspiringly, but it just ended in donuts. And I wish it ended in me giving away
Just
the donuts.
for yourself or for other people?
I think I may have given away 2 donuts.
And you ate the other 10.
And I ate the other
That's
however
actually
many it
still
was.
quite generous I mean, it's like you're on the death row, right? So
It was in the death throes. It's totally true in those donuts. Yeah.
Well, donating a Tipitaka set to the monastery, that's actually quite admirable. I remember
was
that
good.
now.
Yeah.
I remember that now.
I was impressed with myself with that one.
Actually, I did something similar. It's kind of like a merging of your 2 versions. So rather than donate the Tipitaka and then eat a bunch of donuts, which is a good story, instead, with my last bit of money as an anagarika, I bought something like 30 pounds of cocoa powder to donate to the monastery.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was also for myself because I wanted to make sure that I also had lots of cocoa as a samanera.
That's like 2 large babies of cocoa. Wow.
my story is also actually a little bit uninspiring because also I let go of everything, but then there was, in fact, now that I remember, some money left, and I gifted the monastery a nice computer laptop.
Which you were able to then use.
Yes. I was like, oh, when I ordained, oh, look at this nice computer that the monastery can use, including me.
That's hilarious.
So that was a little trick. So generous, but not too generous.
Could we crowdsource? Can we ask the other monastics here who've
Yes.
given up money to the extent? Venerable Wade, Ajahn Wade?
See, I don't know if there's much of a story to it. I was staying in Abhayagiri for a while before I went to Thailand to ordain, and I was just steadily making small acts of dana at the monasteries I was staying at, I think, and nothing kind of very especially intentional or anything like that. So not much of a story around that. I think the big thing for me giving up was leaving the romantic relationship I was in. So.
Leaving the what?
The romantic relationship. So leaving them, so the small amount of money I had wasn't a big deal. Not really much of a story there.
Can people hear? Do we know? Okay.
Do you want to go to the next one? Okay. So Brian says, I understand that the precepts are for the renunciation of behaviors that cause suffering, but the effort required to maintain them, especially in the beginning, itself can be suffering. Why is it so hard to renounce that which we know causes suffering? Is it because we like it?
Okay.
Well, in the beginning, we hold on to our old pleasure sources because we don't know any better. So this is the normal behavior of people who are not skilled in the Dhamma, is they're going through life seeking to get more pleasure and have less pain. And so in the course of that, we, in our own delusional, confused, muddled way, we start scouting out ways of gaining pleasure and having pleasant times in samsara. And this is totally normal. And most people, that's what they do for their whole life, and then they die without learning any better. But at some point we come across the Dhamma, and we start learning about true happiness and how to acquire true happiness through non-attachment, through the elimination of desire and aversion. But we still have these strong habits of pleasure seeking, which we developed prior to Dhamma practice. And so we still know that those are ways of producing pleasure. But as we start to cultivate Dhamma practice, we also start to cultivate an awareness of the drawbacks of those pleasure-seeking strategies, awareness of the disadvantages, awareness of the discomfort that they can cause, awareness of the discomfort of the underlying desire that fuels it, awareness of the limitations of the pleasure sources that we're habituated to. So we're starting to become aware of the dukkha characteristic. But in the early stages of practice, we also usually don't have an experience of the happiness of contentment, the happiness of renunciation. There's this kind of difficult transition period where we're like, okay, so Buddhism teaches that there is a higher happiness which we can attain by letting go of desire, a higher happiness which we can experience through practicing contentment and non-attachment and relinquishment. But we haven't actually experienced that on any deep level. So we just keep falling back on our old pleasure strategies. And even as we start to get some experience of the pleasure of contentment, the happiness of contentment and renunciation, then we still have those old habits of pleasure seeking and more coarse and drawback filled ways. So we still tend to go back to those because that's what we're used to. So there is this kind of extended transition period where we're trying to retrain our mind towards these more refined and pure forms of happiness that come through contentment and renunciation. So that's what comes to mind for me anyway. I'd like to hear what the other venerables have to say about this.
Maybe that just like one of the most graphic similes in the suttas comes in the Maggandhiya Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, maybe number 76. Maggandhiya is this sensualist who talks to the Buddha, and there's one line in it which didn't think I was going to quote, where Maggandhiya says, the Buddha asks, "How do you understand Nibbana?" He says, "Nibbana is right here," and he strokes his body. It's right here. But the main point of bringing that up was is leprosy. So several similes of lepers. So this is leprosy, Hanlon's disease. It's people who have this start losing feeling in parts of their body, and because of that, those parts of the body will then start to get bacterial infections and then get more and more infected, and thus actually back in the Buddhist time, and I think still today, people will try to cauterize the infections, the infected areas with fire, but then it gets just to more and more festering, and the Buddha says, so it is with sensual pleasures. It's like you were saying, the vipalasas are these perversions of thought, or just deep misperceptions, hallucinations. It's like the Buddha said that people chase after sensual pleasures because they get a measure of gratification from those sensual pleasures. We do like them because the Buddha says in this simile, just as the leper's senses are impaired, so too our faculties are impaired. We don't yet know have sensitivity enough to the pleasures of jhana, so we go ahead just cauterizing ourselves with sensual pleasures, and we know it. We eat until we're numb, or we watch Netflix until we pass out, or whatever it is on the level pre-monastic side of things. But yeah, that's the flavor. It's this just cauterizing a wound it's not actually helping, just gratifying cravings is ultimately unsatisfying. That's samsara. That's what keeps samsara just churning and grinding away.
Yeah, which is why it's so helpful to actually have the precepts, because just by the virtue of taking that, you kind of put a sort of muzzle on this mouth. In Italian, we have this saying that says, appetite comes through eating. So the more you eat, the more you are hungry, like the more you want to eat. So this is essentially what the precepts do, like literally. I mean, kind of like the precept, for example, of not eating after noon. Well, that was very difficult for me, actually. As a layperson, I was going crazy. Like I could do it for a couple of weeks, but then afterwards, when I started living in monasteries, that was my entire basically experience. That was really, really difficult, right? And so that, like actually, as you were mentioning, right? So there's dukkha, I remember. Yeah, I was like, well, that's a reliable form of sukha, is just eating until I basically am like numb with all of this eating. And then, yeah, you put a muzzle on on the mouth. You can't do that anymore. And of course, at the very beginning, is very, very painful. But you also start, it creates this room and spaciousness to also start really, truly observing the drawbacks, actually, of your experience of eating, right? Because you're not constantly doing that. So there is a little bit less actually appetite. There is more apparent suffering that comes, I think, in those intermediate phases, which is why we really need to stick to the precepts. And it can be a bit of a sort of fight, right? There's also a lot of actually fighting, combating metaphors, both in actually the suttas and also in a lot of other spiritual traditions, including Christianity. Like the Desert Fathers that I'm very fond of, like the early Christian monastics, they're always talking about literally getting into a huge fight. Like their whole practice is basically fighting with demons. So that's what it is. Like at the very beginning, these they're like serious. I mean, well, not serious. Actually, they're quite really coarse and unrefined demons. They're like, oh, like ice cream or whatever. But then the more you stick through it, you stick with it, and you stop feeding the demons, they kind of like just disappear, right? And so it's not a that's what is, you internalize this practice of renunciation. Then it's not renouncing anymore, because you actually see suffering as suffering. Like for me, it's not, I'm not renouncing anymore to kill sentient beings, for example. Like it's atrocious, the idea to pick up that practice. I could never do that. I would be literally ashamed and like just feeling disgusted just at the thought of it. It's kind of like, if I think, oh, now I'm going to start stabbing my spiritual companions, that would be just awful, like horrible. What? No, fear and dread, hiriotapa, about that. So it's the same actually with any sentient being that I encounter. So it's not renouncing anymore, because that has been internalized. So when we keep, I think, like looking, observing the drawbacks of when we get hooked up in centrality, then we can also apply the same system, right? Of then also addressing all the other kind of like more sophisticated demons that keep on showing up, right? From like the giant course, and there will be all the subtle ones that will be creeping in that we think they're friends, but then they're little angels, but instead they're like all the little demons of our like little cute attachments here and there. And but the logic is always the same, I guess. And I think that there's
Well, we have another question online here.
okay.
So Moraya says, is there something else besides jhana that the Buddha recommended to replace sensual pleasures? Well, I mean, actually, just there's many things in the sutras which the Buddha mentioned as ways of cultivating happiness and pleasure in a wholesome way. So one of the more obvious ones is loving kindness meditation, which is something that brings a lot of happiness and pleasure, brings a very joyful state of mind. I also mentioned already the cultivating an appreciation of contentment, the serenity of contentment. The Buddha also recommended recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as things which bring a lot of joy. Recollection of one's own goodness, recollection of one's own generosity and morality. These are also things that bring a lot of happiness and pleasure to the mind. So those are a few that come immediately to mind. Do either of you think of some other examples?
Just one, all the things that you named are great, but I think that in that sutta that I reference, which is talking about the type of inner pleasure which is to be cultivated, the Buddha modifies him with 4 adjectives, which I think describes the flavor of all those happinesses: the happiness of pleasure, or the happiness of giving, the happiness of keeping precepts. In those 4 modifiers, the Buddha talks about the pleasure of renunciation, so keeping precepts, practicing metta, all of that has a flavor of renunciation. Talks about the flavor or the pleasure of seclusion. So you're getting secluded from stinginess, the pleasure of peace, the pleasure of awakening. So yeah, those flavors, flavor of renunciation, flavor of seclusion, flavor of awakening, flavor of the other one. Anybody listening? Yeah. Yeah, so getting a sense of those flavors. And
Good. Yeah.
Okay. Joe.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Pulse. The Buddha teaches that freedom from discontent arises from practicing mudita, appreciative joy in the happiness of others. I was wondering if you had any examples from your time in the holy life of, like, if you've witnessed any specific examples of spiritual joy that you found nourishing, as like kind of, I really appreciated you sharing, acknowledging that difficult period on transitioning from sensuality to renunciation, and I found that mudita would be a really nice kind of nourishment on that transitional path. Do you have any good examples of spiritual joy that you appreciate seeing in your spiritual teachers or spiritual friends?
Well, actually, I've been having so much mudita in the past couple of days here at Empty Cloud. Actually, also seeing how, in particular, actually, Ayasobana is so happy here at the monastery. And this has been a source of, just incredible joy and happiness. That, I had my little part in contributing to her her current joy. That is, wow, it's such a, it's so blissful, right? So much. I think that's been, this week, even though I'm very exhausted right now, actually, because I've been doing a lot of meetings and I'm still a little jet lagged, actually.
and you're going to be leaving in 2 hours?
I'll be leaving now. A little bit of a parcel being shipped here and there. So it's been an intense week, but actually one of the most joyful weeks at Empty Cloud Monastery, precisely because of, it just feels really good to contribute to the happiness of others, much more than going I want this monastery to be in this way or this other way for my happiness or my recognition, me. As Ajahn Sumedho says, whenever I think about myself, I'm depressed. So it's such a great quote, right? Because it really gives us some perspective. In fact, actually, I used to be very depressed before starting Buddhist Insights with Bhante Suttaso 10 years ago. I mean, it was tangible. I remember after a year of making merit, so much merit, not being paid, just doing volunteering and practicing and offering the Dhamma. I remember I used to, since I was a teenager, get really depressed, suicidal for at least a week intensively every year. And I remember after a year I was oh, it's about the time that I get depressed, and it's kind of oh, maybe it's not happening right now, maybe next month. And then it's 2 years. I'm wow, what's going on? Why am I not having this? Because it had become a kind of sort of demon that
Annual routine.
Yeah, it's kind of you have Easter, Christmas, and week of
suicidal
depression. Suicidal depression. Laughing about it now, but it was really dramatic, but also so revelatory of this initial freedom that we really have just by making merit, really, as the Buddha tells us, to not be afraid of merit. Merit is a synonym of happiness. And so just by that, because I stopped what shifts when you do service is that you're like thinking about others, and instead when you're depressed, what are you doing? It's like me, and I wish that this was this, and and what should I do? Like, enough, basta. Right? It's like all this drama. So then when you're over the drama, then there's the Dhamma.
Okay, I think that's actually a beautiful point to end. So thank you all for your participation. Thank you to my fellow venerables for this wonderful discussion. And we can conclude at this point with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hope to see you all again soon.